about investigations in heart failure. Very important, especially for your OSCEs, when you ask how you're going to investigate this patient. So these are the things. I always like to group things, so I look always systematic. Group always your investigations to bedside, things you do in blood, what we call serology, and finally your imaging modalities. Okay, so let's not take time. Okay, so number one, bedside, you want to do a urine dipstick. Okay, and a urine dipstick is very useful because it will help you rule out UTI. Remember, a UTI is one of the most common causes, or what we call precipitant or triggers of heart failure, especially in our setting. So it's useful to do. Then number two, you want to do a bedside ECG. Okay, what will that help you? Okay, especially arrhythmias. Okay, arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation can trigger or precipitate heart failure. Very, very common finding in our setting. Okay, however, ECG will help you other things. Okay, maybe the patient had a prior MI to show you the cardiovascular risk factor. The patient can have bundle branch block. The patient can have LV age, which are still signs of prior ischemic heart disease, or things like chamber enlargement. So it's very useful to do ECG, and especially if the patient is presenting with an acute MI. Remember, acute MI can precipitate heart failure, so it's important to rule out all of them. And finally, the other bedside thing that you're going to do is echo. Okay, remember echocardiogram. The thing with echocardiogram is usually rarely needed in your acute setting. Okay, so it's typically something we do later. If someone is presenting in acute fulminant heart failure, there won't be any indication to do it. However, there are some indications listed by the European Heart Journal of when, if you want to do it immediately. Okay, you want to do it immediately if your patient is hemodynamically unstable. Okay, if your patient is hemodynamically unstable in acute heart failure, it is indicated to do it. Okay, or however, it should be done within 48 hours. Okay, if you have cardiac structure or function, you don't know the actual cardiac structure or the function, okay, or it has changed over the past 48 hours, so it is useful to do it that early. Okay, otherwise echo is very, very useful, especially for the long term. Okay, it will help you. Are you dealing with a systolic dysfunction? Are you dealing with a diastolic function? It will help you. Are you dealing with what is the likely underlying etiology? Am I dealing with ischemic heart disease? Am I dealing with cardiomyopathies? What am I dealing with? Okay, and very importantly, it also helps you with your estimated ejection fraction. Remember, estimated ejection fraction is useful for especially your long-term management on which drugs that you are going to give. Okay, and finally, it will help you is the chambers enlarged, hypertrophied, and all that. So echo is very, very useful to do. All right, moving on to serology. Okay, remember, everything you do, you must always know the reason why. FPC will look on two things mainly: white cell count and your HP. Remember, anemia is a common precipitant of heart failure, so you want to rule that out. White cell count is useful because if it's raised, you are thinking it's probably an underlying infection that you have to look for that is triggering the acute heart failure. Then you move on to your urea and creatinine, your GFR calculation, and your UNEs. Okay, so this is very useful because remember, you want to know especially your potassium levels. Okay, potassium levels are important because if the patient is already hyperkalemic, you do not want to use ACE inhibitors. You would want to titrate or at least correct that before you give your spironolactone, because remember, spironolactone is a potassium sparing, so it will cause hyperkalemia. An ACE inhibitor is one of the antihypertensive that cause serious hyperkalemia. So if your hyperkalemia is above 5.5, you want to correct this before you start some of these drugs. Okay, so it is useful to do a UNE. And remember, UNE derangement can be a trigger of heart failure too. Okay, then we move on to LFTs. Okay, the thing with LFTs is that they don't change your management, but you definitely, so because of the congestion, of course, you will see your transaminases are raised and even your intracanalicular markers are increased. Okay, however, in patients with end stage heart failure, especially advanced, okay, they get what we call cardiac cirrhosis. Okay, so eventually, if you have heart failure for 9 years, eventually your liver will start failing because of that congestive hepatomegaly, and you present with your bilis are high, your GGT indicating a jaundice or a liver that is actually cirrhotic. Okay, so LFTs are not so useful to do, but they will be deranged. Okay, now you can do TSH. Okay, TSH, remember, is a screening tool to rule out. You want to rule out hyperthyroidism. Okay, remember, hyperthyroidism is a precipitant of heart failure, so it's very useful to do. Now, there's a thing called, in the past we used to call it brain natriuretic peptide. Okay, nowadays you hear it being called B-type natriuretic peptide. Okay, this test we actually do. Remember, brain natriuretic peptide is a hormone that is produced by your cardiomyocyte in response to any stretch. Okay, typically your stretch, especially if you have increased ventricular blood volume, you will have a production of brain natriuretic peptide. So the utility is it if the patient is coming in big room or whatever casualty and is presenting in acute dyspnea. Okay, you want, and you are not so sure, am I dealing with acute heart failure or am I dealing with a non-cardiac cause? Okay, that's where brain natriuretic peptide, because if you are not sure what is causing the acute dyspnea, is it a COPD exacerbation or is acute heart failure? And those things are very hard to tell them apart. You can do a brain natriuretic peptide. So it's used in the acute setting to help you differentiate if you are dealing with acute heart failure or you are dealing with a non-cardiac cause of the acute dyspnea. Okay, that's very useful to know. Okay, other blood work that you may want to do depending on the situation. Of course, you want to do your cardiac enzymes if the patient uh, is presenting in what looks like chest pain and you want to rule out an MI. Remember, an MI can trigger heart failure, so it's useful to do that. Okay, you may want to look for cardiovascular risk factors, so you do HbA1c, glucose to rule out any element of diabetes. Okay, of course, because of that, you can also do your lipid profile. Okay, just to see what's the level of control of the lipid in this patient. Is it hyperlipidemic? Okay, and finally, something very forgotten but it's very, very important: iron deficiency anemia is pretty common in heart failure. Okay, it's typically associated with increased morbidity. This patient have increased hospital stay, they tend to get premature death and exercise tolerance. So it's useful just to look at your ferritin or your total binding capacity to just help you diagnose quickly concomitant as a superimposed iron deficiency anemia. Okay, moving on to imaging. Okay, there are two imaging of choice that we do: chest X-ray. Remember, chest X-ray will help you, especially number one, to rule out a pneumonia. Okay, remember, pneumonia and UTI are the number two causes or precipitants of heart failure. So you want to rule that out. However, a chest X-ray will tell you is a cardiomegaly. Again, that shows you there's probably an underlying cardiovascular disease there. You want to know what are the signs that you're picking up for pulmonary edema. Remember, left-sided heart failure typically causes pulmonary edema. Are you having upper lobe diversion? Are you having a battling appearance? All those signs that you can pick up for pulmonary edema. Okay, pleural effusions are very common in heart failure, so you want to rule them out. Okay, Kerley-B lines. Remember, Kerley-B lines, they typically indicate interlobar septal edema. Okay, typically seen in left ventricular failure. Okay, again, so all those things are things that you can pick up clinically on a chest X-ray that will be helpful in your management of the patient. Okay, and finally, there's what called a right heart catheterization. Typically, you do it with pulmonary artery catheter. Okay, these are fancy things that you do